Such a beautiful song and such a beautiful segue into what I wanted to start my presentation with. As a hospice nurse, when we come into people's homes, we do find sadness and we find grief, but we also find joy and celebration of life. So the first thing I want to share with you is some very potent medicine for stress, for pain, and for conflict. And this medicine is available to you at any time. This medicine can bring your mind back to center, back to focus. It can deepen connections with people. It can lighten the mood, and it can also save in gas mileage. I'll tell you why later. So what I would like to do is invite you to let me share this medicine with you for about 1 minute. And I would invite you to participate in this medicine with me for 1 minute. It might feel a little awkward at first, but just kind of go with it. And what I invite you to do is laugh with me. So when we laugh, we are breathing deeper, our hearts are beating faster. That means you have more oxygen circulating. Laughter can relax you. It can relieve your tension and stress. And when we have more oxygen circulating in our bodies, we have less pain, a higher pain tolerance. And it can actually be beneficial in healing wounds, laughter. So how does it manage to help you with your gas mileage? Well, when we are relaxed at a stoplight, we're probably not going to gun our accelerator to get it. But if we're stressed out, we're going to do that kind of thing. And that takes a little extra gas, right? So laughter, very potent medicine. So on the flip side of laughter, there are tears. And in our culture, we have been trained to hold back our tears. A surprising number of people hide their vulnerability this way. And if one little tear slips down their face, they immediately wipe it off and apologize for crying. But there is medicine in tears. There's wisdom in tears. And scientists have looked at the composition of tears, and they found that tears from emotion are very different than tears from, say, chopping an onion. And guess what they found in the tears of emotion? Natural painkillers and stress hormones. When we perceive something as stressful, our body squirts out these hormones to allow us to either run away from the stressor or to deal with it. But what we do in our culture is we swallow the stress hormones, and we got to get rid of them somehow. Laughter is one way, and crying is another way. And there's lots of other ways too. So when we laugh, when we have a good laugh or a good cry, this is why it feels good. So, yeah, so there. I don't know. So, I see death a lot. I am a hospice nurse. I visit 5 to 6 dying people a day. I'm in hospice full time. So I see it a lot, and I know what to expect when somebody's going to die from heart disease, lung disease, cancer, strokes, AIDS, Alzheimer's, and old age. So in my presentations, what I like to do is answer the question, what is it like to die? I share honest information, what happens head to toe, emotionally and physically in the last months, weeks, days, hours, moments, and seconds before the last breath. I like to share what happens emotionally for the dying and the families, and some of the struggles that families face during this very difficult process. And it's my hope that with what I share with you today, you are more informed, of course, and hopefully less afraid to initiate those very difficult conversations about death and dying with family, friends, and your physicians, so that you can best plan for the end of your life. We spend more time planning for things like vacations and birthdays and weddings than we do this inevitable journey towards death. And these tough conversations about death and dying, if they don't happen before the end of your life, life can get very tough in the end. And that's a whole nother presentation for another day. Yeah, so, let's see. Since I have just a little bit of time to share with you what I know, I've decided to offer you a very small piece of this mystery about death that somebody recently most eloquently termed the woo-woo stuff. The woo-woo stuff. Basically, it's what happens emotionally and spiritually, and I'm going to target the last couple of weeks of life. And I'd also like to share with you what to say to the dying and what not to say to the dying as well. Most of what I'm sharing with you today comes from my new book, Enduring Love, Inspiring Stories of Love and Wisdom at the End of Life. And besides being a hospice nurse, I'm a photographer, and to date, 334 families have allowed me to come into their most sacred and vulnerable space with my camera. And I strive to photograph that unwavering expression of love that endures between people who are living with terminal illness. So this book has over 100 portraits of hospice patients and families embracing love and life. Someone in each of the photographs has since died. It also includes conversations with the dying, a little bit about hospice, what death and dying looks like, grand love stories, these stories about the dying, their advice for living, and the wisdom their illnesses have gifted them. So I want to share a few stories with you. Most of them are in this book. And so as a hospice worker, I am absolutely, wholeheartedly certain that healing can happen during this dying process. Not so much the physical healing, but emotional and spiritual healing. And what I mean by this is a return to wholeness, self-acceptance, the ability to absolutely give and receive love, the ability to unconditionally forgive and be forgiven. With every hospice family I visit, there's usually somebody in the house who gets a healing out of the experience. Sometimes it's me. And maybe something I share with you today will provide you with a healing or a path to healing. That would be delightful. So, I'd like to share a story with you about a lovely man named Jack. Now, Jack's story isn't in this book. It's in my third book, which is going to be coming out next year. Jack was a 78-year-old man who was dying from brain cancer. And his family all lived on the East Coast, and he was here in Oregon alone and lived in a nursing home. And one day, I was with Jack, the last 2 weeks of his life. I was sitting by his bedside, holding his hand, and at this time, typically, the dying are in and out of awareness, in and out of consciousness. It's like they have one foot firmly planted where they're going next, and one foot uprooting from this world. And so sitting with Jack, he was clearly in a very deep sleep. I was holding his hand, we were alone, and he started talking to Chuck. Chuck wasn't in the room. This conversation started with such an emotional plea for forgiveness. And then it proceeded to laughter. And he was talking to Chuck about those days down by the creek when they would make mud pies and throw them at their little sisters when they were walking home from school. And with reverence, He said, "Chuck, I'm coming." So I called his sister in Boston later that day and said, "Who's Chuck?" And she said, "Chuck was his best friend in high school. When he was 17, Jack stole his father's truck and went over to Chuck's house to pick him up because they were going to go on a midnight joyride. There weren't seatbelts back in those days, and so when Jack swerved to miss the neighbor's dog, he crashed into a tree, and Chuck went partially through the windshield and bled to death right there in front of Jack. He was helpless to help him, and because he had bad injuries too, and that would explain the big scar that he had down his face and down his neck. So my question to you is, do you think that his brain tumors were causing a hallucination and then him seeing Chuck? That's what the medical people would say. The woo-woo people would say, "Oh, yeah, Chuck was there. He was speaking his truth. He saw Chuck." And does it matter anyway, really? Chuck got closure with Jack. There's a fly buzzing around. Jack got... That's Jack. He got closure with Chuck. That's funny. So, there were a couple of you when I said, do you think the tumors were causing his hallucinations? You kind of looked at me like, yeah, maybe that's it. So, in response to that, I have a little meditation I'd like to take you through. Cueing Richard here. So, get yourself comfortable. Yeah, just so comfortable. And in this meditation, if you feel tears welling up into your eyes, let them spill. This is your body's innate wisdom in releasing emotion, releasing stress. So, close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, notice the pace of your breathing, notice the speed of your beating heart. Bring into your awareness somebody you love who has died. It could be a beloved pet. It could be a person you've known, or someone you haven't even met yet. Bring this beloved into this moment, right here, right now. See their hair or their fur. See their eyes twinkle as they gaze into yours. Notice their smile in recognition of you. Bring this beloved to sit right in front of you. Your knees are touching. Now your beloved is offering you their hand. Take it. Feel their love travel through your hand and up your arm and over your shoulder and deep into your chest. Allow their love to fill your entire body. It's just pouring into you. Now let's reciprocate that love. Feel the love in your chest. Let it go down your arm and through your hand and up their arm and over their shoulder and into their chest. And with each breath, you are filling each other with your love. Notice the pace of your breathing as it quickens a little. Notice the speed of your beating heart. Is it a little bit faster? Notice the emotions that you are feeling as you are holding hands with this beloved who has passed before you. It could be sadness, joy. Just be with those feelings. with the loving presence of this beloved, you can call on them and bring them into your awareness at any moment, any day, 24 hours a day. Take 2 deep breaths, and on your second breath, open your eyes. Jack was so not alone. Agreed? Right. So the dying often see their deceased loved ones, often, really often, and will tell them, I'm coming. Sometimes with elation, I'm coming. And families can be very alarmed when this happens. They don't know what to do when their loved ones are speaking out loud to people who have died years and years and years ago. One of my patients, Richard, who was in the last couple of weeks of his life, kept calling for his dog, Jocko. Come here, Jocko. Come on, boy. Come on, Jocko. Like that. And his son, Richard, said, Dad, Jocko's been dead for 15 years. Your dog's name is Dallas now. Don't you remember? Here's my advice. Go with it. Just go with it. The better response would have been, hey, Jocko, good to see ya. Hey, boy, good boy. Are you hungry? We're going to go get something to eat. That would be better. So my advice is not to debate or correct people who are in this end stage of life, who will be, speaking to the deceased family members. When we were young children, we innately called out to our mothers when we were needing love or support or comfort, or if we were bursting at the seams and needing to share our joy. And a fair amount of dying people also call out for their mothers and their fathers. So if a 90-year-old lady is calling out for mama, 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 I mean, how helpful would it be if I said, your mother's been dead for 50 years? What I do, and what I tell family members to do, is get in close, stroke their hair, and I'll say, Mama's here. I love you. You're safe. It has beautiful effect, and I highly recommend that approach. It's also quite beautiful to see the dying sharing their joyous visions of angels and all sorts of spiritual and religious figures that are often up in the corners of the room. At this most amazing time, calm words are spoken of packing, bringing the car around, and I'm going home. People who are in the last couple of weeks of life say they are going home. They might have been living in their house 25 years. I'm going home. They get ready to hop on the train they hear coming. They rush people along so they don't miss the bus. They have told me, don't forget the suitcases by the door, especially the big blue one, because that's the one that has the presents in it. Go along with it. Just go along with it. Okay, I won't forget the blue one. And the bus is coming. Okay, we better hurry up. There's no sense in debating. At this time in the dying process, these last couple of weeks, in and out of awareness, they will be found reaching up above the stillness of their bodies. When this happens, I will slip my hand into theirs, and often a beautiful contentment can follow. I just wonder, whose hand are they reaching for? What are they reaching for? And it delights me to think that my hand might be representing the hand of God or somebody who has passed before them. Maybe their contentment simply comes from simple touch. And this simple touch is all that is left in the end. I'm at deathbeds all day long, and you know what people are doing? They're holding hands. They're touching. And this is what I started to photograph, is that expression of love. And so, maybe that's all that there is to do. Right now even, simple loving touch. So I'm also convinced that the dying review their lives very carefully at the end of life. A life review does happen. Fond memories and passions are often relived and expressed. I have seen a prize-winning quilter sewing fabric, invisible fabric, in front of her chest. I've seen a retired OBGYN putting on his gloves, getting ready to deliver a baby. A fisherman cast his line over and over again. I've seen an opera singer leading her orchestra with this invisible baton in the air. People do a life review. There's a life review that happens. Sometimes they express it this way, and sometimes there's no expression, but guaranteed, they're busy. They're busy in their minds and in their hearts and souls in this last part of their lives. Essential time is also spent in taking care of business, in memories to resolve old issues, if any. People are coming to terms with their life's choices. And here the dying can get kind of restless, especially if there's a lot of business to take care of, and some might not even want to be touched. Sometimes loving touch is refused. And this could be why. Because they don't want to be interrupted. They're working on some issues they had with their own parents. But also, as people are dying, their world shrinks. Right now, my world is right here and out the door and down the street. But as people die, their world shrinks to right about here, right here. They're quite busy during this time. So if you are with a dying person in the last couple of weeks of life, and they don't want you near them, it could be because they're doing some very important work of closure. In a recent television interview, I was asked, so what do I say to the dying? And it kind of depends. Are the dying frustrated and angry? Or are they calm and accepting? If people are frustrated, don't try to fix it. I don't try to fix anything. I don't try to paint a silver lining on this big gray cloud of grief. It's important to provide a very safe environment for however their grief shows up. To listen compassionately, and also to witness their struggle and to acknowledge their struggle. So how do you acknowledge someone who's struggling with the fact that they're dying and they're very upset and angry? You say things like, wow, there's a lot on your plate right now. Or, this must be so overwhelming to you. Or, you seem really angry about this. I don't blame you for being so angry. Anybody who's angry can be diffused by acknowledging and witnessing they just want to be heard. So those are good things to say. If you don't know the person very well, what I suggest is to ask them questions. Find out who they are. I know there are some people in here who are considering hospice volunteering. Ask questions. Who are you? What are you most passionate about? What brings you the most joy? Here's something really important. Dying people want to be treated normally. The last thing they want to hear is, how are you feeling today? You ask things like, so what'd you think of the World Cup outcome? What book did you read recently? You know, ask them questions like that. Did you watch any good TV shows? Any good dreams lately? What are you thinking about these days? You know, you ask questions. You make them laugh. It is always my goal to make my hospice patients laugh. Sometimes it's not appropriate, but when the opportunity comes, this is a medicine that you don't use sparingly. It can definitely lighten mood and all those other benefits I told you about. If you know the dying person well, tell them how they have enriched your lives. Be honest and authentic. And it's okay to share your fears and your distress with them. Sometimes silence is the best. But we live in a culture where silence and stillness is very uncomfortable for people. We want to say the right words to make it all better, and we want to do and we want to fix. There's powerful medicine in sitting quietly and just holding hands. Here's a few things not to say to the dying. Everything happens for a reason. I hear people saying these things. The dying can perceive this gesture as they are at fault for their disease. Remove that one from your vocabulary. Also, everything will be okay. This is unkind because if it's not okay, it's not okay. Okay. Be strong. You can beat this. That's futile, especially if they can't beat it. And by saying, be strong, you can beat this, it doesn't give them space to share their fears and their distress. And finally, it's God's own will. Remove that one from your deathbed vocabulary, because that could imply that our loving God doesn't love them. Yeah. So here's a story from my book about what to say that I really want you to take with you today. This story is about Carol, 58 years old, dying of ovarian cancer, stage 4. She had maybe a month left of life to live. And her brother Mike was, to say the least, an health enthusiast. And he was certain that if she drank this medicinal tea 3 times a day for a year, it would reverse her cancer. And this tea came from a very sacred slope in India, and the whole thing. Well, Carol tried it, and she refused to take more than just 1 sip. She said it tasted like cat pee. Mike wouldn't tolerate it, and their relationship became strained. And he stopped talking to her for a while when she needed him the most. So family and friends, and you, can experience intense frustration if people don't take our well-intended advice. We think we know what's best for people and strangers. We've been there, we've done that. We know what to expect based on our own experience. But this is something I would like to offer you some advice unsolicited, to take it or leave it. When you are with somebody in struggle, or not, just say, what is the most loving thing I can do for you right now? What is the most loving thing I can do for you right now? And you have to honor the answer. Honor the dying. They are the boss. They might say, could you give me a drink of water? Could you rub my back? Can you do my dishes? Don't serve me things tasting like cat pee. Could you go away? Yeah, honor the answer. Here is the number 1 question I hear. Number 1 question I hear. When is my mother going to die? My answer can trigger a phone tree that can put people on airplanes all over the globe. My answer can can change priorities. People give a moment's notice to their employers and their families, and they get in their cars and they come. I better be right? Well, most people follow a very predictable pattern of decline in their dying process. Very predictable, but some don't. I have told families, Grandma is probably going to die in the next couple of hours to a day or 2. And then she's alive for well over a week. And then grandson John comes in from across the country, says goodbye to Grandma, and then she dies. Do you think that Grandma would have died at that very same moment, regardless of John's visit? I have assured families that they have, a couple of weeks to get your affairs in order. And then we all look over and poof, last breath. Do you think that our body has a will of its own to let go? Can a sense of completion of this life allow our bodies to release? There have been cases where I cannot physically explain why somebody is still alive. They outlive their skin. It's phenomenal. And a lot of times, these people who outlive their skin are those who have lived very stressful or angry lives and have a lot of unfinished business. So can unfinished business keep our bodies alive? Do the dying need permission to let go? Some families hold 24-hour bedside vigils, days and days and days and days. And then one day, they decide, all to go get a cup of coffee. And that's when the dying person lets go, alone. So the big questions are, does our physical body have a will of its own? Does our emotional body have a will of its own? And is there a divine will working in the mix as well? Yes. So my answer, do we control our last breath? I've seen it enough times to say yes. I do believe that we are a choice when we have to take our last breath. And one of the biggest worries in families is, I don't want my mother to die alone. I want to make sure that she's there. I promised her she's there. But you know what? She's so not alone. No, she's so not alone. I've seen it too many times. The house is full. The house is full. So I'd like to conclude with this one last story from my book. It's about Bernard. He confessed to me. He said, I don't think my prayers are good enough. I wasn't taught how to pray properly. He said, at 12 years old, I started liking downhill skiing better than going to church on Sundays. So I asked him if he only thought that poetic, articulate people get their prayers heard. He said, how does God know what I need to communicate if I can't say it right? So I offered him this idea, and I offer you this idea as well. I suggested, don't say anything during prayer. I had him close his eyes. I had him bring his attention to the feeling of what he wanted. And also the feeling of what he wanted already being answered, and offer that to God. So while he was doing that, I got out my phone and I Googled how many languages there are on the planet. And I said to him, okay, if God is able to interpret all 6,500 languages spoken on this planet, God can interpret honest feelings without words attached. And he was so relieved. And he said, I hope God understood that all I want is for my wife to be safe after I die. So, thank you very much. It's been a delight to share this with you. My books are available for sale in the back. And am I done? Can I take questions or how's our schedule?
Have some questions if you want to.
Have some time. Okay, beautiful. Anybody have any questions about? Oh, thank you.